David Madeira on 94.3 FM, The Talker.
Welcome back, folks. 888-577-4487. This may be one of the most exciting hours of the day because our next guest always has something interesting to say, and I always have something interesting to say to him. He is a guy who I have a great deal of admiration for because I have, over the last several years, had a chance to observe him in action. And his courage in the face of what I think is really an incredible danger, a danger that has kept so many others silent for so long in northeastern Pennsylvania, is really a challenge to me. Because, look, I get on the air and I opine about work that other people have done. And you know, I share my opinions and I try to extrapolate a lesson from it, you know, a broader lesson. But Lou is down in the trenches, and his team over at the Independent Gazette, they're down in the trenches. They're trying to sort through and differentiate myth and rumor from truth, and then expose that truth without any regard to whose ox gets gored. And to me, that is what journalism in the ideal is. It's much like the teaching profession. In the ideal, right, teachers are entirely dedicated to the students. They will sacrifice their own needs for the students' needs, and that puts them at an extremely high position of honor. Unfortunately, the union system that has been established around the teaching profession has perverted that. And it's clear to everybody that teachers as a whole don't seem to be focused on the interest of the children as much as their own interest. The same is true of journalism, Lou.
Absolutely.
The journalism profession, in the ideal, is that you go out and you find the truth, and it doesn't matter whose ox gets gored. And we've seen recent resignations at the national level. Cheryl Atkinson, of course, a fabulous investigative journalist who is just dedicated to finding the truth and doesn't care whose ox gets gored. We see her resigning from her very lofty position over at, I think, CBS, primarily because she said, it was an intolerable situation. We were not allowed to tell the truth.
Or get their stories out.
And get the stories out. And she said, I put together great stories. Right. I put together really important stories that were ignored. And that's primarily the great thing about our free market, not a system, just reality,
right?
Is that the truth will out. And that in every gap, there will be a man or a woman or both who will stand there and say, here is the truth. And that's what I think you guys do. I'm not saying you always get it right, but you always try.
That's right.
And the Scranton Independent Gazette and the Wilkes-Barre Independent Gazette and the growing muckraker publications all are focused on getting the truth out. And one of the reasons that I think you've been so successful is that you've told stories that others haven't been willing to tell. This custody for cash story is one of those.
Absolutely, David. And what happened with the custody for cash, and so your listeners understand what's going on, is that it was in January, and we had an individual, actually it was Bruce Levine, that actually came to us, and he told us the story. And we sat down, and our team got together, and we sat down and said, well, wait a minute, is this something that we really want to look at? And the more we started looking at it, we said, yes, this is something that we want to look at. Once again, we started hearing not only from him, but then from others that they tried to get this information out in the media. And sometimes what happens, too, it only comes out in tidbits. And then it comes and goes. And as you know, the next day there's another new story. And I have to, when I look at this sometimes objectively, and talking to some of our TV newscasters locally, they've told me, they said, Lou, sometimes I'm jealous because you guys could really dig into this. We have 15 minutes to get our story out. We got a new story the next day. And I think that's why this is so important and what we're doing anyway. So anyway, this custody for cash, he was talking about, the children and the money that's involved, and obviously Daniel Ross, the now convicted felon, guardian ad litem, who I didn't even know what a guardian ad litem was. Maybe you didn't either.
I had no idea what a guardian ad litem was.
Thank goodness I was never part of the family court system. But a guardian ad litem, mommy, daddy is having a divorce. They both each have lawyers, and then the court appoints this guardian ad litem for the children, and very often that is not the case.
So the guardian ad litem is the same as we just talked about, the teachers and the journalists. They're supposed to be there to represent someone else's interest. That's the ideal.
That is the ideal, was the ideal.
That's not happening.
And it's not happening at all. And
give me an example. of how that's not happening. How is we just mentioned this convicted
A lot
felon.
of it has to do with money. Okay, and I'll throw this particular one out. Professional individual here in actually Luzerne, but they're part of the Lackawanna system. Sent for 133 drug tests.
Okay, seems like an important thing to do if you're protecting the interest of children.
Except he's passed all 133 drug tests.
Who's passed them?
The individual that went to go.
Oh wait, one person was sent for 133 drug tests.
One individual, 130
had to go for 133 drug tests and never failed one.
Passed them all. He doesn't drink and doesn't do drugs.
Well, obviously. It goes without saying, but good point. Okay. So there might be.
No.
So you peeled back the orange there to find out why was this guy having to go through this system over and over again when clearly there's no evidence that he's got a problem.
So here he goes now before the judge and complains to the judge and says, listen, this Danielle Ross, the one that
I'm running out of blood, buddy.
I'm running out of blood. I'm also running out of cash.
Oh, he has to pay for those drug
tests?
tests?
Yeah. Now
he has to pay for those drug tests?
Now, you have to understand here, and this is no surprise, your current guardian ad litem here in Lackawanna County, this is no longer the case, okay? But her mother owned the previous one. But
convicted.
No. The one that was prior to Danielle Ross, okay? Brenda Coble.
Okay.
I don't mind mentioning that name.
It is what it is.
Her mom owned the drug testing company.
Oops.
Now but
oops.
That's gone now. Huh. That's 4 years removed.
Maybe that could be a potential conflict of interest. I don't know.
Perhaps. But so let's just go back to the 133 drug texts. So now this individual goes before the court and now we have the court documents because I see I not to say I'm not going to believe somebody, but wait a minute.
Hey, you have
This sounds like an unbelievable story.
Listen, I get it every day. People send me an email saying, here's this happened there. I sent you one yesterday.
Right. Yes, we're
on that one,
too.
And the only reason I forwarded it to you is because it's a credible individual.
Uh-huh.
But this kind of stuff does come across the transom all the time, and you've got to do your due diligence.
Well, you're going to love this. 133 drug tests. He goes there. He goes before the judge, and he tells the judge, listen, Judge, I think this individual, now the convicted guardian ad litem, is overcharging me. Is there something we could do about it? He's told he's delusional, that he now needs to go to a psychiatrist in Harrisburg, a guy named by Scheinvold.
Which he also has to pay for, I presume?
Well, wait a minute. Yes, he has to pay for it. Now, not only do you have to go, but you have to take your ex-wife that you're fighting to go down there also. I have the letter from Dr. Scheinvold. Before you're allowed to come see me, you need to sign over all your HIPAA rights and make sure you bring a cashier's check for $10,000. Now think about this.
What?
Oh yeah, I'm not making this up. I got the letter, but that's just one. David,
right. I just asked you for an example.
I know how you. I know your feelings on children. We talked. I know where you stand on the abortion issue. I know how important children are to you and your family. The third day, an individual, she'll be speaking at the rally, and this is part of a woman goes in for her first child, 40 years old, has a Caesarean. It's botched. They put her on not morphine, I guess, because she's so much in pain. On the third day, she's reported to the children and youth. 3 years later, she's still fighting for that child.
Wait a minute. She had a botched cesarean. The child survived. She's fighting for the child?
Yeah,
Why?
3 years. Because they took it. They said she wasn't paying enough attention to the child.
Because she was on morphine.
Third day, David, right out of the hospital. I spoke with the psychiatrist.
This is right here. This isn't Massachusetts, that famous national case.
Yes, right. This is right here.
It's happening all over.
Now listen, it's all over the place.
Not just here in northeastern Pennsylvania.
David, there's not an hour that goes by that I do not get a phone call for people asking for help, pleading for help.
Oh, God.
Now, I talked to the psychiatrist on that case. 26 years she works in the system. She said, Lou, most egregious case I've ever seen. I've taken it to the Corbett administration. I take it to the Attorney General. I've taken it to the welfare departments.
Nobody wants to mess with it?
No. What she's told is you open your mouth, you talk, you're fired. That is what's happening, and this is why I've said all along.
And we thought Kids for Cash was bad.
And I've been saying this for a while, that I believe this is going to dwarf Kids for Cash, only because not only is it locally, this is a national issue, and you're starting to see it. And as people start reading these stories, and, it gets planted in people's head, all of a sudden you're saying, wait a minute, there's another story in Florida, and there's another one in Colorado, and there's another one over here. I mean, and it's really amazing. And what it really comes down to is, in my opinion, a runaway judiciary. There's no oversight. And that's one of the things that we're pushing now, not only with this rally. And the rally is not just supposed to be about, let's say, a bitch session, okay? We don't want people just coming there and complaining. What we want people to do, we want people like yourself, we want other news media there. We want people not only to listen to some stories in very, very brief. Nobody's going to go on, for 5-minute things. This is what I'm doing. They're going to talk about gag orders. They're going to talk about the money. They're going to talk about the AOPC report that happened here locally, a report that was done by the court for the court to protect the courts. There is no oversight in what's happening with our judiciary.
We were told that all this stuff got solved after Kids for Cash, that everything was going to be all right, that there was reforms done, and the kids were protected. You're saying it didn't happen.
No, and what didn't happen is that so many people are tied into the money scheme. So in other words, like when you're just like that psychiatrist, you open your mouth, you talk, you're fired. We have so many professionals that have come to us and have talked to us off the record. Lou, please make sure you do not mention my name, but I will lose my license. I will lose my law practice. I will, and the intimidation factor is unbelievable. And when you talk about intimidation factors, that's for the professionals. Think about this, David. What would you do for your children? And the intimidation, what if it comes to you do this or
There's a TV show about this right now called Crisis. I don't know if you've seen it, but
I haven't.
The kids are kidnapped, and the whole story is based around what will parents do for their children. I want to talk briefly about the rally so that people can go to this. It's this Saturday, right?
It's this Saturday, that's
Where
correct.
is it?
It's right on Scranton, right on the square.
Starts when?
Noon to 3. We'll be setting up prior to that. There's a Christian rock group coming up from Reading. They're going to be playing prior to that to get everybody in the mood, get the crowd warmed up. And then what we'll do is Jesse Epps will be there. He was just recently inducted into the Civil Rights Hall of Fame. And like you said, we bring a lot of different groups. There's going to be, we're hoping that the Tea Party show up.
Yeah, because this has nothing to do with politics.
Nothing.
And everything to do with making sure that children and families get justice. And they're not getting it.
And just to look at our judicial system, that's what we want. We want cameras in the courtroom. And everything always comes back to the same thing.
Sunlight.
We want sunlight. But then we need legislators. And that's why we just have an election coming up. We're going to be looking at those legislators that are willing.
What's their view on this, right?
What's their view, and are they willing to put cameras in the courtroom as a black box? Because here's the argument that we're going to hear.
Right, yeah, people perform to the camera, and I'm sympathetic to that. People, once the camera's turned on, they start performing to the camera. We don't want that either.
But what you hear is the judges and the lawyers say, we have to protect the children.
Right, so the black box idea is it's videotaped, it's archived, and then if there is a court case later, then it can be brought out.
Well, I tell you, and there's other reasons for that.
The impact of that will be that they're going to behave better because they know there's going to be videotaped evidence.
And you could always go back if there's going to be an appeal. Because I got to tell you, stories that I've heard from lawyers. You have the stenographers. I interviewed an individual here not too long ago. He said, Lou, you won't believe what the judge told me. And then at the end, he says...
This is a stenographer?
No, this was a litigant. He said to me, the judge says to him, if you think this is going to be in the record, you're crazy.
Wow.
And we hear that too. So that's what we want. We want to make sure the money that's involved with this, David, we don't have justice. That's the problem.
All right, folks, it's this Saturday. All this information is increasingly showing up in the Scranton Independent Gazette. It's the only place where you're going to see this stuff. Yeah. Well, I mean, you always are driving the news. You've had a record. You've had a record of driving the news. You tell me stuff, I look at you a little askew, right. And then later on it's in all the mainstream press. If you're not getting the Scranton Independent Gazette or the Wilkes-Barre Independent Gazette, it's free. It's free. It's a public service. It's supported by the advertisers. And by the way, these are business people who really ought to be thanked.
Thank you.
You ought to do business with whoever's advertising in the Scranton Independent Gazette, because these are folks who have courage and want the truth to get out. They have no agenda except the truth. And I know that's your agenda. Thank you so much, Lou, for taking the time to come in this morning. It's Saturday at noon.
And we have some great music going on. There's other groups from Philadelphia coming up. OG Law, God's Love at Work is going to be there. This is like a upbeat, I should say rap. I mean, I've seen them. I'm telling it, really good stuff. And then sprinkled in between those things, people will be telling their stories. And then we want the media to focus on some of these people and say, wait a minute, there is a story here. Let's get this information out. This is not a witch hunt. This is about making our judicial system accountable.
That's right.
And our legislators.
It's not targeting people. It's about getting things right, so that families and children get justice.
Absolutely.
Folks, please check out the Scranton Independent Gazette, the Wilkes-Barre Independent Gazette. You can find them online. The papers are distributed at, the Turkey Hills?
At Turkey Hills. More and more stores throughout Scranton, Wilkes-Barre are carrying them. People can subscribe to it, too, which helps us keep going. We have subscriptions. It's on our pages. That our subscriptions are growing daily. We love that. And
just search Scranton Independent Gazette, and it'll show up.
Bingo.
Thank you so much,
Thanks,
Lou.
David.
Keep up the good work. Folks, don't go away. We'll be right back.
888-577